300 razor-sharp teeth per fish. 40,000 of these living weapons in a single lake. But in October 2018, the most terrifying predator lurking in Brazil's Blackwater Lake walked on two legs and called herself a loving wife. While her husband thrashed desperately in piranha-infested waters, Valentina Restrepo calmly uncorked a bottle of wine. She wasn't celebrating a romantic picnic. She was toasting what she believed was a perfect murder. But here's what will blow your mind. 3 days later, that same dead husband walked through the doors of his own funeral service. The screams that erupted from that church weren't from grief. They were from pure, bone-deep terror. Think about the person sleeping next to you right now. How well do you really know them? What secrets are they hiding behind those morning coffee smiles? Share your most unsettling relationship red flags in the comments, because your story might save someone's life. This isn't just another tale of spousal betrayal. This is a masterclass in psychological manipulation that will make your blood run cold. We're diving deep into the twisted mind of a woman who turned romance into a weapon, love into a death trap. Valentina possessed the kind of beauty that stopped conversations mid-sentence. Raven black hair, emerald eyes that could convince you black was white if it served her purpose. But behind that stunning exterior lurked something far more dangerous than any flesh-eating fish, a calculating killer who had already perfected her craft. Her target? Guillermo Memo Vasquez, a gentle giant whose only crime was having a heart too trusting and a bank account too tempting. This hard-working mining engineer never suspected that his dream woman was actually his worst nightmare, studying his every move like a predator stalking prey. But here's the question that will haunt you. How many Valentinas are out there right now, sitting across dinner tables, planning their next victim's demise? How do you spot a killer who kisses you goodnight? Stay with me as we uncover the most jaw-dropping survival story you've ever heard. Because what happened next defies every law of nature and human psychology you thought you knew. The setting for this nightmare? Blackwater Lake, a mirror-dark death trap where indigenous tribes refuse to fish, where even the bravest local guides whisper warnings about waters that have claimed hundreds of lives. Scientists call it the most concentrated piranha habitat on Earth. Locals call it cursed. But Valentina saw something different when she gazed across those deadly waters. She saw the perfect murder weapon, millions of tiny executioners that would eliminate evidence, witnesses, and questions. All she needed was the perfect victim. Before we dive deeper into this terrifying true story, smash that subscribe button for True Crime Speaks, because the cases I uncover will change how you see the people around you forever. And trust me, after today's story, you'll never look at a romantic getaway the same way again. Now, let me take you to a place where death lurks beneath every ripple, and where one woman's greed would lead to the most shocking funeral service in criminal history. Deep in the heart of South America's Pantanal wetlands, where Brazil bleeds into Bolivia through endless miles of untamed wilderness, sits a body of water that locals refuse to name after dark. They simply call it the lake that feeds. Blackwater Lake earned its ominous title not from pollution or industrial waste, but from something far more sinister. The countless dissolved remains of every creature foolish enough to disturb its inhabitants. The water appears ink black, not because of depth, but because of density. 40,000 red-bellied piranhas call these waters home, alongside their more vicious cousins. The black piranhas with jaws that can snap through bone, and the massive red-throat piranhas that hunt in coordinated packs. Indigenous tribes have passed down warnings for generations. Their elders speak of waters that think and hunt, where the fish communicate through vibrations, coordinating attacks that can strip a full-grown jaguar to skeleton in under 4 minutes. Modern science confirms their fears. This lake contains the highest concentration of aggressive piranha species anywhere on the planet. The ecosystem operates on a simple rule. Everything that touches the water becomes food. Drought seasons transform the lake into a killing field as water levels drop, concentrating thousands of hungry predators into smaller spaces. During feeding frenzies, the surface literally boils with thrashing bodies, turning the water red for hours. But piranhas aren't mindless killers. They're calculating opportunists. They wait for the perfect moment. An injured animal, a struggling swimmer, the scent of blood in the water. Their attacks follow precise patterns. First, The scouts detect distress signals. Then a message spreads through bioelectric communication faster than any human can react. 20 miles from this aquatic nightmare sits Esperanza, population 847, a mining town built around copper extraction that draws desperate fortune seekers from across South America. The town exists in isolation, connected to civilization by a single dirt road that becomes impassable during rainy season. Here, secrets fester in the humid air. Everyone knows everyone's business, yet strangers can disappear without questions asked. The local cemetery tells a story. Too many graves marked mining accident or unknown causes. It's the kind of place where people come to escape their past, but often find something far worse waiting for them. The town's economy revolves around danger. Men descend into unstable copper mines daily, accepting death as an occupational hazard. Life insurance policies run high here. Mining companies know they'll pay out frequently. It's a place where a wife's tears at her husband's funeral barely raise eyebrows, because premature death is simply part of life. Rose's Cantina serves as the town's unofficial meeting place, where miners gather before dawn and newcomers scope out their opportunities. The walls display faded photographs of men who never return from their shifts, a grim reminder that tomorrow is never guaranteed in Esperanza. Father Miguel's Catholic Church provides the only moral anchor in this lawless frontier town. But even he admits that some confessions keep him awake at night, wondering if he's harboring wolves among his sheep. This isolated community would become the perfect hunting ground for a predator who understood that the most dangerous monsters often wore the most beautiful masks. The combination of isolation, desperation, and death made Esperanza ideal for someone planning murder. No one investigates too deeply when tragedy strikes. It's simply accepted as the cost of living on society's edge. Emergency services operate hours away. Forensic capabilities are non-existent, and local law enforcement consists of one overworked constable who's learned not to ask uncomfortable questions. Into this volatile environment stepped a woman whose beauty masked intentions darker than Blackwater Lake itself. She'd studied her target location with the precision of a military strategist, recognizing that some places on Earth exist outside normal moral boundaries. The lake and the town formed a perfect partnership for her deadly plans. One providing the weapon, the other providing the cover story. All she needed now was the perfect victim, someone whose death would generate maximum profit while raising minimum suspicion. What she didn't anticipate was encountering a man whose survival instincts would prove stronger than her killer instincts, setting the stage for a confrontation that would expose the true monster lurking beneath Blackwater Lake's surface. On a sweltering Tuesday morning in March 2017, Rose's Cantina witnessed the arrival of someone who would forever change Esperanza's deadly equilibrium. Through the dust-caked windows, patrons watched the woman step off the weekly supply truck with the grace of someone who'd never known hardship, yet her eyes held secrets darker than the surrounding wilderness. Valentina Restrepo possessed a kind of beauty that weaponizes itself. At 34, she'd mastered the art of vulnerability performance. The slight tremble in her voice when discussing her traumatic past, the way her emerald eyes filled with perfectly timed tears, the delicate way she touched her throat when claiming her ex-boyfriend had tried to strangle her. But beauty was just her opening move. Valentina's real weapon was her ability to become whoever her target needed most. She'd spent years studying human psychology, learning to identify emotional vulnerabilities faster than a piranha detects blood in water. Within minutes of conversation, she could determine exactly what type of woman you'd fall for, and then become that woman. Her backstory was carefully crafted fiction. Fleeing domestic violence in Colombia, a dangerous ex-boyfriend who'd threatened to kill her, desperate need for protection in a foreign country. Every detail designed to trigger masculine protective instincts, while simultaneously explaining why her past remained conveniently vague. What the good people of Esperanza never discovered was Valentina's true history, a trail of wealthy boyfriends who died under suspicious circumstances across 3 countries. Ricardo Mendez, the coffee plantation owner who'd vanished during a romantic hiking trip in the Andes. His $400,000 life insurance policy had funded her escape to Brazil. Carlos Herrera, the oil executive who drowned during their vacation in Venezuela. Another $300,000 windfall that she tearfully collected as his grieving fiancé. Valentina had perfected a system. Target wealthy, isolated men, establish herself as their devoted partner, study their insurance policies and financial assets, then orchestrate accidents that appear beyond suspicion. She was a serial killer who used romance as her hunting method and insurance fraud as her profit model. Her selection process followed scientific precision. She needed men who were emotionally vulnerable, financially valuable, and socially isolated. Men whose deaths wouldn't trigger extensive investigations, whose families lived far away, whose friends wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. 6 weeks after her arrival, Valentina identified her perfect target. Guillermo Memo Vasquez had been living in Esperanza for 3 years, long enough to establish routines, but not long enough to form deep local connections. At 41, this gentle giant from Guadalajara had built his life around 2 principles. Work hard, trust completely. Both qualities would prove fatal. Standing 6'3" with shoulders broadened by years of manual labor, Memo commanded respect in the mines through competence rather than intimidation. His crew called him chief not because of rank, but because of the calm authority that made dangerous situations feel manageable. When mine shafts threatened to collapse, when equipment malfunctioned, when disputes arose between workers, Memo's presence provided stability. His engineering expertise had made him wealthy by Esperanza standards. The mining company valued his specialized knowledge enough to offer a lucrative contract with substantial death benefits. His personal life insurance policy of $500,000 remained unchanged from his previous marriage, a financial detail that would soon cost him everything. But Memo's greatest vulnerability wasn't his money. It was his isolation. 3 years of solitary dinners, weekend shifts, and empty company housing had created an emotional vacuum that Valentina recognized immediately. He sent most of his earnings to his aging mother in Mexico, lived modestly, and dreamed of eventually starting his own small mining operation. His daily routine was heartbreakingly predictable. Breakfast at Rosa's Cantina at 6 a.m. sharp, 12-hour shifts in the mines, solitary dinners while reading engineering journals, early bedtime in preparation for another identical day. He'd been trapped in this monotonous cycle for so long that the arrival of an interested woman felt like divine intervention. Memo possessed the trusting nature of someone who'd never encountered true evil. His previous marriage had ended amicably over career differences, leaving him convinced that relationship failures stemmed from incompatibility rather than malice. He couldn't conceive of someone using love as a weapon because genuine affection was the only kind he'd ever known. His fellow miners noticed his inherent decency. Memo consistently worked extra shifts to help colleagues meet quotas, loan money without expecting repayment, and volunteer for the most dangerous assignments to protect younger workers. These admirable qualities made him beloved among his crew and fatally attractive to a predator seeking her next victim. What Memo didn't realize was that his reputation for reliability and kindness had been carefully studied by someone who viewed these traits not as virtues, but as exploitable weaknesses. His predictable schedule, his emotional loneliness, his substantial assets, and his trusting nature created the perfect storm of vulnerability. When Valentina began appearing at Rosa's Cantina during his breakfast routine, Memo interpreted her presence as coincidence rather than calculation. Her shy smiles, her apparent interest in his engineering stories, her seeming vulnerability. All of it felt like the romantic connection he'd been unconsciously seeking for years. The predator had found her prey, and the prey had no idea he was being hunted. Valentina's campaign for Memo's heart unfolded with military precision, disguised as romantic spontaneity. She understood that successful manipulation requires the victim to believe they're pursuing you, not the other way around. Her strategy began with calculated proximity. Each morning at Rosa's Cantina, she'd occupy the same corner table with a perfect view of Memo's usual spot, always arriving 5 minutes before him. She'd order black coffee, never touched, and pretend to read letters from home that she'd written herself, occasionally dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. The performance was masterful. When concerned patrons asked if she needed help, Valentina would offer a brave smile and explain that she was still adjusting to life away from family. This established her as both vulnerable and admirable, someone struggling nobly with difficult circumstances. She studied Memo's behavior patterns with scientific accuracy. He always ordered the same breakfast, always sat facing the door, always checked his watch exactly 3 times during the meal. More importantly, she noticed how his eyes lingered on her table, how he'd slow his eating when she appeared distressed, how he'd glance over whenever she laughed at something in her fake letters. On their 3rd synchronized breakfast, Valentina escalated to direct contact. As Memo prepared to leave for work, she accidentally dropped her papers near his table. When he helped collect them, she noticed his callous hands and commented on how safe they made her feel, a brilliant psychological stroke that simultaneously complimented his masculinity and hinted at her need for protection. "You have kind eyes," she told him, executing physical contact by briefly touching his weathered hand. "I can tell you're the type of man who protects the people he cares about." That single sentence activated every protective instinct Memo possessed. Within minutes, he'd invited her to share his table, and Valentina knew she'd successfully hooked her target. Their courtship accelerated through carefully orchestrated stages. First came the tragic backstory: an abusive ex-boyfriend in Colombia who threatened to kill her if she ever left. She'd barely escaped with her life, she claimed, using money saved from her job as a dental assistant to flee to Brazil. Every detail was designed to position Memo as a rescuer rather than her victim. Valentina's performance deserved awards. She'd flinch when men raised their voices, claimed nightmares about her abusive past, and expressed tearful gratitude for Memo's gentleness. She transformed their relationship into his heroic mission to save a damsel in distress. Within 2 months, she'd moved into his company housing, claiming her rental situation had become unsafe. Within 4 months, marriage became her urgent necessity. She feared deportation without legal documentation. She explained, begging for his protection through matrimony. Memo, completely captivated and genuinely believing he was saving this beautiful woman from danger, proposed with his grandmother's ring during a candlelit dinner she prepared in their shared kitchen. The proposal felt like his idea, exactly as Valentina had planned. Their wedding ceremony at Father Miguel's Catholic church drew half the town, a perfect public display of their love story that would later provide witnesses to her devotion. But Father Miguel would later tell investigators that something about Valentina's eyes during the vows had made him deeply uncomfortable, though he couldn't articulate exactly what bothered him. During the ceremony, while Memo gazed at his bride with complete adoration, Valentina was mentally calculating insurance payouts and planning murder scenarios. She'd already researched Blackwater Lake extensively, learning about piranha feeding patterns and identifying the perfect location for her husband's accident. The marriage lasted exactly 6 months, precisely long enough to establish herself as his legal heir and beneficiary. Throughout their brief union, Memo never suspected that his devoted wife was actually studying him like a lab specimen. She learned his work schedule, his insurance policies, his personal habits, and most crucially, his complete trust in her intentions. Every kiss goodnight was reconnaissance. Every "I love you" was manipulation. Every romantic gesture was theater designed to lower his defenses. When Memo expressed interest in taking survival courses during his off hours, Valentina encouraged him enthusiastically, never imagining that this hobby would later save his life and destroy her plans. Have you ever ignored warning signs in a relationship because you wanted so badly to believe in someone? Share your experiences in the comments below, because recognizing manipulation might save your life someday. While Memo worked dangerous 12-hour shifts believing he was building a future with his beloved wife, Valentina was secretly constructing a financial house of cards that would eventually collapse and crush them both unless she eliminated him first. Her gambling addiction had started innocently enough, online poker games to pass time during Memo's long work hours. But Valentina possessed the same addictive personality that made her effective at manipulation. Within weeks, she was playing high-stakes games with money they couldn't afford to lose, chasing bigger wins to cover previous losses in an escalating spiral of financial destruction. The numbers were staggering. She was losing an average of $15,000 per week in international poker tournaments, believing her psychological manipulation skills would translate to card game success. She was catastrophically wrong. Professional gamblers could read her tells easily, and online algorithms didn't fall for her emotional manipulation tactics. Within 4 months of marriage, she'd secretly accumulated gambling debts totaling over $200,000. But gambling was only the beginning of her financial crimes. Valentina had also been systematically committing identity theft using Memo's information. She'd applied for credit cards in his name, taken out personal loans using forged documents, and even established a line of credit against his life insurance policy. Her spending spree included designer clothes to maintain her appearance, expensive electronics to facilitate her gambling, and luxury items that fed her narcissistic lifestyle. Most dangerously, she borrowed $150,000 from loan sharks in Sao Paulo. Not the kind of creditors who accepted late payments or sob stories. These were violent criminals who'd already sent threatening messages, making clear that her time was running out. They knew where she lived, they knew about Memo, and they were planning a personal visit to Esperanza within the month. The loan shark's most recent message had been particularly explicit. Pay what you owe, or we'll collect it from your husband's corpse. They weren't making idle threats. Their reputation was built on following through with violence. Faced with financial annihilation and physical danger, Valentina began obsessively studying Memo's insurance policies, like a student cramming for final exams. She discovered that his life insurance policy would pay $500,000 for accidental death, but only $100,000 for suicide, a distinction that would prove crucial to her planning. Even more valuable was Memo's mining contract death benefit. His specialized engineering skills had earned him a lucrative agreement that would pay his surviving spouse $300,000 if he died in a work-related accident. However, the payout required specific conditions. The incident had to appear accidental and occur while he was technically on company time. Valentina spent sleepless nights calculating potential payouts. Combined insurance and death benefits totaled $800,000, enough to pay off her debts with substantial money left over for a comfortable new life somewhere else. All she needed was to make Memo's death appear accidental while ensuring maximum financial benefit. Her research led her to dozens of cases involving spouses who'd murder for insurance money. She studied their methods, their mistakes, and most importantly, how investigators had caught them. This wasn't passion-driven murder. This was corporate-level planning applied to homicide. The solution had to be brilliant enough to fool investigators, yet simple enough to execute without assistance. It needed to appear like a tragic accident that no reasonable person could have prevented or predicted. Most crucially, it had to eliminate physical evidence while creating an unshakable alibi. That's when she discovered Blackwater Lake. Local folklore described the lake as a perfect murder weapon, millions of flesh-eating fish that could eliminate evidence, witnesses, and questions within minutes. Indigenous tribes spoke of victims whose remains were never recovered because piranhas left nothing behind but clean bones that sank into unreachable depths. Valentina began researching piranha behavior with academic thoroughness. She learned about feeding patterns, seasonal variations, water temperature effects, and most importantly, how to trigger feeding frenzies. She discovered that piranhas become most aggressive during dry seasons when concentrated populations compete for limited food sources. She identified the optimal time for attacks, dawn and dusk periods when warming water triggers hunting behavior. She studied how movement patterns affect piranha responses, learning that thrashing and panic create bioelectric signals that attract every predator within miles. Most brilliantly, she realized that Blackwater Lake's remote location made it perfect for her alibi. She could claim they'd gone there for romantic fishing, a believable story that explained their presence while positioning her as a loving wife sharing her husband's interests. The plan crystallized with shocking clarity. Lure Memo to Blackwater Lake under romantic pretenses, push him into piranha-infested waters during peak feeding time, then return to town as a grieving widow whose husband had suffered a tragic accident while fishing. Her research revealed one final crucial detail that sealed her decision. Local emergency response to Blackwater Lake took minimum 4 hours due to difficult terrain and bureaucratic procedures. By the time help arrived, there would be nothing left to investigate except her tearful account of watching her beloved husband disappear beneath the surface. If someone close to you suddenly became interested in your insurance policies or asked detailed questions about your work benefits, would you recognize the warning signs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your awareness could save someone's life. Valentina spent 3 weeks crafting what she believed to be the perfect murder, approaching Memo's death with the same methodical precision she'd once applied to winning his heart. Every detail required careful planning, because she'd only get one opportunity to execute her deadly scheme. Her timeline was ruthlessly practical. The loan sharks had given her until the end of October to repay their money. Memo's birthday fell on October 15th. Perfect timing that would make their trip appear spontaneous and romantic rather than calculated and murderous. She began her manipulation campaign 2 weeks before his birthday, casually mentioning how hard he'd been working and how much he deserved a special celebration. When Memo suggested they could have dinner at Rosa's Cantina, Valentina expressed disappointment, explaining that she dreamed of giving him something more meaningful, a romantic adventure that would create memories to last a lifetime. "You work so hard for everyone else," she told him, practicing the same manipulation techniques that had won his heart months earlier. "For once, I want you to do something just for us. Something special that shows how much our marriage means to me." Her research into Blackwater Lake had been thorough and terrifying. She'd driven to the location 3 times, studying access routes, identifying the deepest sections where piranha populations concentrated, and locating areas with no cell phone coverage or potential witnesses. She'd even tested water temperatures at different times of day to determine optimal conditions for triggering feeding frenzies. Most crucially, she discovered an abandoned fishing shack on the remote side of the lake where she could hide supplies and potentially eliminate evidence afterward. During one scouting trip, she'd pre-positioned underwater fishing line designed to tangle around Memo's legs when he inevitably fell overboard, ensuring he'd be trapped beneath the surface long enough for the piranhas to complete their work. The murder weapon itself was elegant in its simplicity. She'd rented a small motorboat from a fisherman 30 miles away, paying cash and providing fake identification to avoid creating records that could later implicate her. She'd practiced handling the boat during her scouting trips, ensuring she could operate it confidently during the actual murder. Her alibi required careful construction. She called Memo's mining supervisor personally, explaining that Memo wanted to conduct a preliminary geological survey of the Blackwater Lake area for potential expansion of the mining operation. This crucial lie would later classify his death as work-related, triggering the additional $300,000 insurance payout.
Valentina had carried out 3 successful deaths using her brilliant killer instinct, but this time she never knew Memo's survival instinct was just as brilliant as her killer instincts. Do you think she would be able to eliminate Memo successfully? Stay tuned for part 2.